Fellow Toastmasters, contest master, and distinguished guests, imagine the persona that I'm describing. And for those of you that do different kinds of marketing work, you're probably familiar with the concept of a persona. But a persona is a type of person. And I'm going to describe a persona, and I don't want anybody to raise their hand and guess during the presentation. Just think about the persona that I'm describing. And this persona has 4 pillars. The first pillar of this persona is that they're able to acknowledge their mistakes, something that's very difficult for all of us to do, to acknowledge and recognize mistakes so that they can learn from them. The second pillar for this persona is that they understand, and in fact, they embrace, they harness the power of please and thank you, probably the 2 most underutilized words in the English language. The third pillar that this persona embraces is to loudly and proudly acknowledge their supporters. They look for opportunities to recognize and value the contributions of others. And the fourth and final pillar is that this persona understands that listening is oftentimes more valuable than speaking. And I know for Toastmasters that can be counterintuitive because we focus so much energy on speaking, but listening is very valuable. So let's talk about the first pillar. The first pillar is about acknowledging mistakes, and we all make mistakes, but this persona does not let themselves be defined or defeated by the mistakes they make, but rather this persona will let the way they respond to those mistakes define who they are. And this includes acknowledging the mistake, apologizing to the people that are impacted by your mistake, very important. And if you've ever been infected by somebody else's mistake, you know how welcome an apology and an acknowledgement is from the person that made the mistake. And then, perhaps most importantly, is learning from your mistake. So if you make a mistake, it's okay to make a mistake, as long as that you don't make the same mistake over and over again. The second pillar about harnessing the power of please and thank you. Very, very powerful. This persona understands that when they ask somebody to do something, that when they precede that request, it sounds more like a palatable proposition as opposed to an order that's barked at them. And if you think about your own personal experience, please get me a cup of coffee versus get me a cup of coffee, those leave you as the receiver of that request feeling very differently. Thank you, the same thing. If I do something nice for somebody and somebody thanks me, I'm much more willing to go the extra mile next time they ask for something. So thank you as a sincere follow-up to some service that you've been providing is a big win. And this persona understands that please and thank you is their currency, and they're not afraid to overspend. The third pillar is recognizing your supporters proudly and loudly, publicly. The people that support you, they make you who you are. This persona understands that their power, their ability to function and impact is based on the people that support them. And so acknowledging those people and in fact scouring for opportunities to acknowledge your supporters makes this persona very, very powerful. And the fourth pillar is about listening. And again, listening for a Toastmaster is not always an easy thing to do. We like to speak. That's what we do. We're here, we're speaking, we're learning how to present. But think about it for a moment. If you're in a profession where you interact with people, or if you think of a family event that you've been to, where do you get more information? Do you get information when you're talking? You don't get information when you're talking. You already know what you're saying. And a lot of times when you're insecure, you'll have the uncontrollable urge to show people that you're knowledgeable and that you're experienced and that there's somebody you should like. But in the midst of that, you lose the communication. You don't gain anything because you already know what you're saying. And the person that you're speaking with is tuned out because nobody wants to talk to somebody when they can't get a word in edgewise. There's no communication, there's no interaction, there's no engagement. It's just a one-way street. And learning how to listen, and very good active listeners, and it sounds counterintuitive. I know how to listen. But do you really know how to listen? Do you know how to sit across the table from somebody and process what it is they're saying without worrying about how you're going to respond to that, without listening to what they're saying? You will unearth gems that are just below the surface if you're an active listener. Find gems that would otherwise remain out of sight. So finally, if you guess Toastmaster, you're on the right track. And you might say, well, Toastmaster, isn't that a Toastmaster? Well, a Toastmaster is what I'm referring to. This persona is a leader. And the Toastmaster is a leader in training. We learn skills and activities that allow us to develop leadership skills, but it's the actual application of those leadership skills out in the real world that separates the leadership wheat from the chaff. And as Toastmasters, we, as Toastmasters and indeed leaders, should go forth. We should learn from our mistakes. We should use please and thank you as many times as we can. And by all means, we should look for every opportunity to acknowledge those people that support us, and we'll find that we are going to become a better leader. And in fact, if we learn how to listen as well as we learn how to speak as Toastmasters, we will indeed become leaders among leaders. And so I'll end with the slogan from Toastmasters. Toastmasters, where leaders are born, are made. Madam Contest?